Welcome to our live stream, F1 fans around the world, in the build-up to the Miami Grand Prix. Can't believe it. We're actually going to have some Formula One, shall I say racing? Yeah, we can say that. Formula One racing within 10 days. Amazing. Miami Grand Prix. Lots of build-up already there. The teams putting out press releases about what they're going to do with their new capsules, encasing the new products of their sponsors. It's the new catchword, I think, a capsule of this, a capsule of that. And we'll be seeing the new Formula One revised regulations under the spotlight, literally, at Miami, to see what the fans think of it all. Talk about irony. I mean, just thinking about what they're trying to do for the starts now, or planning to do for the starts. It's not going to happen in Miami, but they're looking at this now, and probably will happen because they don't normally put out press releases about things like this unless they're bound to happen. And that is that for slow starters now, quite what defines a slow starter, of course, is a grey area. And how quickly this would happen as well is a grey area. But nonetheless, if you are slow away from the line, you are in theory going to be able to benefit from some sort of MGUK power boost off the line. And that could be helpful for teams like Red Bull, which have been unbelievably slow off the line from the start of the year. So they may just opt for that, go for it straight away. Make sure you're really slow. We'll get the MGUK boost. But it is an irony, is it not, that they are doing that in order to clear up the potential dramas on the grid. We've seen already enormous speed differentials getting away from the line and really erratic starts in terms of a global picture. And the irony is just enormous, because the reason I guess they never wanted to have MGUK playing a role in the starts is because they wanted to have the noise of the engine and the revs and make it a bit like a traditional start. But because it's so difficult to get the turbo spinning now, they've had to go back to this makeshift thing of, well, you know, we'll give you a bit of electricity as well to get you off the line if you're slow. Talk about a mess. The changes they're making, and if you haven't seen them yet, have a look at the two videos we got out now. Chats with Mark Slade about the changes to the Formula One regulations. Mark, I can't think of a better person in Formula One really to talk about these than Mark, because he has no access to grind at all. He's a friend of this channel, and he has enormous knowledge and understanding of the politics and of the technology. So have a look at those. But the bottom line is that in order to make the cars look more like racing cars in Miami, with less backing off on the straight and super clipping and not even on the main straights. I mean, on that, towards that kink we saw at Suzuka, you know, what Colapinto did to Oliver Behrman, to try to eliminate that, they're actually reducing the amount of power that you have to regenerate, basically. So they're making the car slower. And as I've always said, you know, put one band-aid on, then another follows immediately if there's a chronic problem that is not going to be solved because the regulations were flawed in the way they were drawn in the first place. And the other point, of course, is that they are now able to get more power at the super clipping stage. But as Mark Slade said, that actually is going to take speed from the car. And so what we've got now are Formula One cars are actually quantifiably slower than they were when the regulations were drawn up. And if you recall the amount of chat that was coming out about how we got to make sure these cars are fast, and one of the reasons we have active arrows just to try to make sure they're as quick as they are in a straight line. And here we are having to put all these band-aids on now to make them slower. I asked Mark in the videos yesterday whether or not he felt that with these new revised regs, if they went back to Suzuka now, whether Sector 1 would still be ICE only. And he said, you know, it kind of depends. He didn't really give a definitive answer, but he certainly didn't say, oh, this would solve the problem. Now we'd definitely have 700, 800 horsepower going up through the S's. And I don't think there's any guarantee we're going to have anything like that on the great corners. And so, yeah, make corners great again. As you can see, I got the T-shirt. I put it out on the community, and I'll be wearing it again. Don't worry. And so, I mean, Miami gets a pass, really, because there aren't any great corners at Miami, apart from that sort of double apex right corner section after the start. But that's not, you know, it's okay, but it's not preceded by a massively long straight that rewards or penalizes what you're going to do. The long straight is preceded by a tight corner, as ever, a chicane type corner. So, yeah, jury's out, really, still. I think these changes will will be better. They'll make the cars more sanitary. They'll make the cars look a bit better, sound a bit better. But for me, front axle energy generation, MGUH, the big fight there with Audi about that is still the undercurrent of what is wrong with Formula One right now. And just as a reminder to that, the Audi didn't want to have MGUH on the car because they'd never run it, but they'd done a very good job with generating energy from the front axle in WEC, and the teams didn't want to allow that to happen because obviously Audi had a big advantage in that area. So the answer would have been, well, in that case, we'll keep MGUH. But of course, they were talked down there, and for political reasons. The sport wanted Audi more than it wanted to listen to the teams. It seems the situation. And as I've said, as I indeed said to Mark, I think, that is something we've never seen in Formula One, that the technical because that eventually then rewrote the technical regulations, and the technical regulations being rewritten by a political third-party issue of a team that's not even in Formula One at this point is unheard of. And okay, well, it's heard of now. You could say, so what? Well, the reality is we should have a demarcation line, in my opinion, between the technical regs, the sporting regs, and where the sport needs to go from a promotional commercial standpoint. And Bernie Ecclestone did a very good job of creating all these rights that he ended up owning prior to 2000, and then started to sell them off at vast profit. Good luck to him. He saw the opportunity there long before anybody else. But one thing that was very clear in my mind was that whenever Bernie did sell commercial rights, the managerial, technical and sporting management, if you like, control, remained with him, remained with Formula One and his mate Max in the FIA. And that's the way he had it structured. And now we've gone, everything is visible, commercial rights here, promoter, and they effectively are running the sport more than the FIA, more than the teams. And so that's why we're in the situation we're in. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good things that come with a promoter, like Liberty, and it's to do with the global footprint of the sport, the growth of the sport, and a lot of the cinematography and digital platform that Liberty have created. But I think more than anything, the lesson from 2026 is, from here on in, we do not allow commercial interest to control the way the technical regulations are written. Now, how that's going to be incorporated into the next set of regulations, I have no idea. But to me, it's a Concord Agreement thing, and the team shouldn't sign anything unless that's clear. That would be my stance if I was involved, and I hope they do take heed of that. Obviously, lots of questions, so we'll get on to those straight away. We got a great show for you today because I prepared 2 additional videos, which we'll go into during the course of the live stream, both of which I think you'll enjoy a lot, hopefully will. But in the meantime, let's get on with questions because that's what this is all about. First one is Tom7616. Welcome to Level 1, by which it means welcome as a member of the channel. If you haven't joined yet, we'd love to have you on board. That's always something that I hope you will consider, and we're going to be announcing some new members-only content coming up very soon as well. So looking forward to that very much. This is from Ronnie Way. Hi, Peter. Some of my earlier posts disappeared. Oh, well, sorry about that. I was doing a test of this yesterday, and when I went to the chat box, there were no questions yet. So maybe as my chat box was wrong. But anyway, thanks for your support of the channel, Ronnie. Anyway, enjoyed your discussions with Mark on the new tweaks to starts, qualifying and race. But sadly, we are still dealing with 50-50 split, ? Faster, ? Well, I did actually ask Mark, and he said that he reckons it's between 5 and 10% effect now, which basically means we're about 40-60 now. Or maybe 45, 55. So it's definitely swung the way of ice. The problem is that the ice is still the same thing. And, if you don't proportionally increase the internal combustion engine power, then the cars are going to be slower. Yeah, that's what's happened. And that's, that's where we're at. Band-Aid after Band-Aid. Sarosh, another good friend of the channel. Hi, Sarosh. Peter, I was thinking as to what I would do in this 1 month gap. Luckily, your podcast, IPL and tennis, kept me away from boredom. Oh, well, I'm sure the IPL and tennis did. In my case, watching quite a lot of golf and getting into the Masters in the way I perhaps normally wouldn't, and some rallying stuff. But yeah, it's been an interesting time, isn't it? Because we are quite, it's odd. It's very strange to have this sort of area of this April where we haven't had any racing. Not to old fogies like me, because we often used to have breaks where we go testing like crazy, but to have no testing and racing is crazy. I know we had the McLarens at the Nürburgring, but sadly not the old Nordschleife. We had McLaren doing some Pirelli testing at the Nürburgring, and I think there was some wet testing as well. Ferrari did. But apart from that, that was Pirelli stuff. Apart from that, it's been very odd, really strange. Another one from Sarosh. Peter, do drivers like Max, Leclerc drive with their fingertips to introduce, manipulate, get a feel of the car? You had written a brilliant piece on how Kimi Raikkonen wanted a light but precise steering in 2012. Yeah, fingers are part of the, obviously part of it, and what you're feeling through the steering wheel. And usually it's thumb and forefinger. Jackie Stewart was a very good exponent of that. And if you look at a lot of photographs of Jackie in any stage of his career, you can always see how he's almost pinching the steering wheel with the thumb and forefinger, and that's where he's feeling the steering. It's different from driver to driver. You can't really come up with a common factor there. But in general, it's all about suppleness. It's all about the harmony of your rates of input with the dynamic weight that is currently being subjected to the car, which hopefully you're manipulating and anticipating. And so long as your inputs, whether it's legs, hips, arms, elbows, wherever it's coming from, shoulders, so long as they're supple and they are in harmony with what the car is doing, for one thing, that will take you into what a lot of sports riders would call the zone, when things start to slow down and you can see a long way ahead and there's a lot of time to recover whatever situation is going on, and you're constantly anticipating what's going to happen next and feeling the car. Of course, if you're gripping the steering wheel really tightly and you've got tension through the arms, the biceps and the triceps, that's not going to be good in terms of your feel. Now, obviously, there are going to be some steering loads, there are going to be bumps, there are going to be all sorts of things that do require a lot of strength through the steering. But that's all part of the variables of a lap in a Grand Prix car. And the great drivers will do that. But in general, they will increase their tension level. But in general, it's going to be all about suppleness, and it's all about softness of touch. Quite a weird phrase, I think, to use in Formula One when you see them putting on the knee pads, which Jock Clear told us that Jacques Villeneuve pioneered. I'm not sure that's right. I think Nigel was wearing knee pads in the 90s, I think, but I may be wrong. Anyway, I'll check on that. Where was it? Oh yeah, and that's why, you know, it is strange to talk about suppleness, because often you see onboards and there's a lot of shadow boxing, and the minute you see a driver shadow boxing, in other words, he's making tiny corrections to the steering wheel, appear to be corrections, movements on the steering wheel, but actually the steering wheel doesn't require that. What he's doing, he's sort of nervously preparing for the next big moment. He knows there's a fast corner coming up and he's getting ready for that moment when he knows it's going to get flick oversteer, and you get a little bit of this excess steering wheel movement. And that's a sign of lack of suppleness and lack of softness of touch, even if the touch at that moment is quite firm, if you get my gist. So getting back to your point about Leclerc and Max, I would suspect there's a difference probably in what they like about the thickness of the steering wheel rim. Can we call it a wheel still? The rim that they're gripping, and there's probably a difference in the shape of what they want on the wheel, and there's a lot of differences there. And there may well be differences in terms of the tension, if you could compare such a thing, of one driver to another, Max to Charles. But in general, the common theme will be a harmony of movement and of feel with the dynamic weights that are constantly shifting on the car. And that's not something you can teach. It's not something you can learn. It's not something you can read about and respond to, like, golf, get your right hip through sooner or whatever it is. Well, even that's difficult enough, to be honest. But there's no textbook out there, that's for sure. It's only going to be repetitive laps over a same bit of road, the same bit of road, with somebody critical watching stroke alongside you, like a Rob Wilson, who can say, no, on that lap, you were actually slightly faster on initial turning. That's why you got that slight bit of oversteer or understeer, whatever it's going to be on the bump, or you turned in on the bump rather than just before the bump. All those tiny details, they're not things that engineers look at in the garage. They're not things that show up on telemetry, but they're things that a driver like a Verstappen or a Clerc or a Lewis will innately feel. They'll innately feel the moment to make a slight adjustment, and it's going to be the great moment, the perfect moment. Another one from Sarosh, who's a member, so therefore, yeah, go for it. Suzuka, Peter, all the great drivers driving a great lap of Suzuka. I enjoy watching Michael the most, even more than Max in 25, Senna 88, 89. Michael looked more natural for Suzuka. Don't know why. Yeah, interesting. I think, I don't know which Michael you're looking at, but if you're looking at Michael Ferrari, you've got to remember that this is to Michael's credit. It's not in any way detracting from Michael, but there was never a moment in Formula One history when the maker of the tyres was more in sync with the designer of the car than in that Ross Brawn Bridgestone era, where Michael was dominant in the Ferrari. And that perfect combination, and it's a great tyre company, Bridgestone. We're not talking about, some pokey tyre company around the corner. This is Bridgestone, one of the best tyre companies in the world, and up there with, with Michelin and Pirelli, and right there, a very, very good tyre company, and lots of deep technology, long before budget caps, and a lot of interface between what Michael and Ferrari wanted from the car and what Bridgestone could do around that request. And if that harmony was as good as I've just described it, there's no circuit in the world that would better showcase that than Suzuka, with its variety of corners, its uphill change of direction through the S's, its long left-hander, Dunlop, its downhill understeery right-hand corners, Degner, then breaking into the hairpin, then the traction run out of the hairpin, then the long left-hander spoon and the long straight and 130R and the chicane. All of those things, I mean, you couldn't come up with a better track. If you've got a perfect synergy between the car and the tyre company in a way that's never been achieved in Formula One before, at the expense of all your opposition who are on the other tyre company, virtually all the opposition, the key opposition anyway, then Suzuka's your circuit in which to, beat your chest. And that's why I think you probably saw Michael looking so good there, because for sure, when he was quick there, when the car was good, always he was in a almost perfect car, probably as perfect a racing car for Suzuka as you'd ever find. Again, that's not to detract from Michael. A lot of the credit for achieving that perfection should go to Michael, of course. And he then drove the car. He drove the car perfectly, as Nigel did in '92 with the Active Williams. Drew C. Peter, this ADUO is weird. So Ferrari gets ADUO, then what happens if their upgrade pass Merc by 2%? Then Mercedes doesn't get an upgrade. How does that ADUO work? And am I the only one confused by it? Well, I think you're not the only one confused by it. And I think something we'll be discussing for quite a long time. And, it's... Somebody asked me in a live stream at the start of the year, did I think there'd be any major changes to the regulations once the season was underway? And I foolishly said what I believe to be the case based on the regulations, that the only changes that would be made would be for safety reasons, or potentially, steps of development with the engine thing. But, how do you possibly evaluate the performance of the Ferrari engine post Miami, given that up until Miami, we know Mercedes, to their credit, have had a different compression ratio system on the car. So how do you possibly do that? Are you confused? Yeah, I'm confused, Drew. So thank you very much for that. Jez James. Seb Buemi's 2010 China crash, where both front wheels came off. Unbelievably tried to steer the car with no front wheels. I guess that's a natural reaction. another of our members. Yeah, yeah, racing drivers do want to get, you know, that never happened. I want to keep going. I mean, Gilles Villeneuve, bless him, was the absolute, personification of that 79 Dutch Grand Prix. Everything falling off the car, but he had to get it, had to keep going, didn't he? He drove a three-wheel Ferrari back, and yeah, you see that a lot. Sort of with Terry Newell in the recent Rally Croatia, went unbelievably with over a minute lead on the final stage for some. I have no idea. I haven't spoken to Terry about it because I don't think it's the right time. I wait for a year or so before the dust has settled. To his own admission, he turned in a bit early. Looks like he just clouted something, a rock face or something, with the right front, and then eased the steering. By which time it was all too late, and the front of the car had been taken off. Why he wasn't just driving down the middle of the road, avoiding all marbles, rocks, everything else, and winning by 5 seconds, using up his minute margin. I've got no idea, but yeah, racing drivers are racing drivers, aren't they? Whether they're rally drivers or not, and that's that's to me part of the way they think, isn't it? Jez, another one. An F1 friend thinks Mercedes bottled it and should have pitted Lewis when Max did on the same few laps of the 21 Abu race. So both were on fresh tyres. Therefore, Max may not have overtaken Lewis. Yeah, well, your friend is obviously retrospectively, that's what they should have done. If they'd known that Michael Massey was going to rewrite the rule book in the middle of towards the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and they weren't going to ensure that all the lapped cars unlapped themselves, then of course they would have brought Lewis in. But the problem is that for sure, Mercedes strategy team would have said, no, we've got 2-lap cars, we've got 3 laps to go, whatever it was. There's no way in the world they're going to be, no way in the world this race will be restarted. Just leave him out there. And that's according to the rules. That's what would have happened. And, that was it. So because the rules were broken in those closing stages, and they didn't allow all the lap cars to unlap themselves, and they just restarted the race with 1 lap to go, of course, then you'd say, oh, well, if we knew they were going to break the rules, we would have brought Lewis in. That was the stupidity of the whole thing. Thank you very much, Michael Massey. Jez James, I heard that Kimi Raikkonen's son, Robin, who's 11 years old, is doing, yeah, well, amazing. Yeah, watch this space. I'm not surprised. Kimi saying, no, you must start with something very slow, 500 horsepower maximum for you. And yeah, on ice. Yeah, wow, he's bound to be good, isn't he? There's just no way in the world Robin Raikkonen isn't going to be a racing driver, I wouldn't have thought. Yep, we got Jez James talking about Anthony Hamilton, definitely doing that. Haven't heard too much more since we first heard that it was going to happen, but yeah, would be good, wouldn't it? Zavej Dougal, 7753. Another regular, thank you very much. Wouldn't extending the straight and shortening the corners as Max and Charles do be detrimental to the battery charging, since battery charging stations would be shorter? Or am I getting that wrong? Yeah, I don't think it's going to change anything. In terms of make corners great again, and in terms of Max and Charles being able to do things that other drivers couldn't, and that's a big point, because there are lots of things that, say, Liam Lawson and Carlos Sainz can do in a racing car, and they're all brilliant things. But Max and Charles can do all of that just with their eyes shut, and they can do a few things extra. That's the point. And those few things extra, they're not able to do. And we'll see in Miami whether they can do a bit more. But I don't see it. I think, in theory, they should be going into corners a little bit quicker. But there's less power, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out, to be honest. But all we can do is have a look at, see what happens. Next point you make, we talk about the negatives enough. What do you think are the biggest improvements in the sport since the 80s, apart from the safety aspect? We need some positivity in this channel. Well, yeah, I mean, it's all very well to say that. We need some positivity. But the truth is the truth. Whether or not, it's not political and it doesn't have a bias. The truth is the truth. And if the truth is that the ability of some of the greatest drivers in the world to create a great corner is now neutered, then is it negative to point that out? I don't think it is. It's just the truth. It's reality. And 5 years from now, when they go to the new regulations, and they may say, "Oh, they were all rubbish. All that electrical stuff was all rubbish." And thanks to those that pointed it out, because we're now going back to V10s or whatever they're going to do. Just because the swell of direction is, oh, let's all be positive. It's like apparently Toto Wolff went on some sort of rant about it all. I don't know. I mean, if all I've ever said on this channel about Toto Wolff and Mercedes is that good luck to them for finding that loophole with the compression ratio. Good luck to them for the harvesting and deployment they have with their 2026 engine. They deserve to win. They deserve probably to win the championship even now. And but Formula One is not going in the right direction. There are issues, and some of the great drivers are not able to do what they used to be able to do with the car, and that's a bad step forward. And some of the great corners are no longer great corners because of the entry speeds and the lack of ability to do anything with the power and the brakes, for that matter. So I don't think we lack positivity, and I'm always, I'm a Formula One purist. I'm a Formula One fan, and I've always loved Formula One. But if I see things going in the wrong direction, I will always say it, because it doesn't mean that, if you like Formula One, you've always got to say everything is wonderful, which is what, of course, a lot of people think you should do. But I'm not of that ilk at all. But in terms of, apart from safety, what are the improvements to the sport? Well, television access, telemetry access, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to come up. I mean, I would say most of it is safety related. A lot of the great corners are no longer great corners, and I think the cars are less attractive to watch than they used to be. And I'm not going to say anything otherwise, just because I want to be, some people want me to be positive about the sport. I think that's what I think. I'd much rather see. I was talking to Mark yesterday. He was at Goodwood at the weekend, where Jensen did a few laps in a 2009 Brawn on wets, and he was saying how nice that car looked and sounded. And he's right. Lovely, small, light, agile car compared to what we have today. And anybody that says, "Oh, well, don't say that, that's negative," they're just, just avoiding the truth and reality. Okay. Aaron, hi, Peter. To a layperson, rallying seems like it would be much more dizziness inducing than track racing. Do you think Rovanperä will be able to overcome it? Have other drivers struggled with this? Jochen Rindt is the only driver I know of that suffered from a similar thing, and it first manifested itself when he went to a full face helmet in the 70 French Grand Prix when he was driving for Lotus. And he actually won the Dutch Grand Prix with a full face helmet. But when he went to Clermont-Ferrand, the French Grand Prix, which is lots of downhill, uphill sweeps, the carousel, they used to call it, the whole circuit, then he did start to feel dizzy and sick with the closed face helmet. So he went to an open face helmet for race day, got fresh air, and he was fine on race day. But that's the only time I'm aware of this happening. And then we hear Kalle Rovanperä had this thing going on in Super Formula in the testing, and he's pulled out of the whole championship as a result. And there were a couple of other drivers that were quite sick after the last Super Formula race as well, both of them European-based, interestingly enough. So I'm wondering whether it's in any way jet lag, vitamin related as well. But, I'm sure that the trainers are on top of that. You would imagine they would be. Rallying, it is an open face helmet for a start, and everything's a lot more open than it is in a car. It could, in Calle's case, it may be something claustrophobic, who knows, because it's, as far as I'm aware, it's never affected him in rallying at all. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the G loading and stuff like that, then it's nothing like as high in rallying as in a Super Formula car. And I was going to say, let alone a Formula One car, but then I remember the Super Formula car is probably quicker up the hill at the S's than a Formula One car now. So it's very high G loading in the Super Formula car. And whereas rallying, there's a lot of vertical G when they're doing the jumps, which is no issue really. And then the lateral G is not great. So for me, it's no surprise that it wouldn't have shown up in rallying in Callie's case. But it is a strange thing. It is a very strange thing. Anyway, I think this is an appropriate moment because you mentioned rallying now, just to talk a little bit about what one of the things we got up to in this break. I went to the a lot going on last weekend. You know, there was WEC, and then there was the Nürburgring with Max, who went pretty well and then had a problem. And sadly, we had a amateur driver lost his life at the ring as well, which I've spoken about on the community page. And we had IndyCar. Felix Rosenqvist finally getting a decent result, which is good. Always been a Felix fan. But we decided to go into the mountains near Cordoba in Spain, about 4.5 hours northwest of where we're based here, into these unbelievably nice roads, mountain roads, a lot of them with camber, some of them very rough, some of them incredibly smooth, and also through lots of lovely old Spanish towns where they had the stage set up and there'd be a town square, and they wouldn't necessarily be doing donuts. It would be sort of zigzags through the square. And the atmosphere was brilliant. It was the nearest I can imagine to what the Mille Miglia or the Targa Florio would have been all about. And so I did that with Jack, and we had a lot of time. A lot of fun. We went to about 6 stages in 2 days. And part of the fun is in rallying, I think, is getting to the stage, finding the stage that you think others aren't going to be at. So you've got a decent view. Here's a quick corner. Let's watch from there. Or there's a slow braking, tight braking area. Let's watch from there. And you choose these different things and you go there. And that's part of the rallying appeal, I think. And we did that, and it was just glorious. Just really loved it. Anyway, here's a little video of what happened it was the second round of the Spanish Rally Championship, and it was the opening round of the 2026 European Rally Championship, which is a big deal, the championship just below Rally 1. And as I said on this channel before, a Rally 2 car is a really quick car. And if you look at the roads that we're on here in Spain and the surroundings, some of them sheer drops. A Rally 2 car is quite quick enough, in my opinion, and they look fabulous. They sound fabulous. The level of skill is amazing, down top 15, top 20 drivers. And I just loved it. I love the way they built the rally up and where it's going. I think rallying's in a really, really good place at the moment. I know there's a bit of a drama going on with the promoter maybe changing hands. I hope not too much changes, actually. There's been a couple of videos out about what can we change to improve rallying, what can make it better, and all 1 million different ideas, make the drivers bigger on the world stage, make them heroes, make them stars, or make it easier for the fans, or this and that. My input: don't change anything. It's brilliant, and I loved it. And here's one of the reasons why. Glorious weather, amazing roads, and beautiful. I love this Lancia Ypsilon HF Rally 2 car, based on the Citroën, obviously, but really, really quick and gorgeous looking car. Impressive that Andrea Mebellini, in his first appearance with the team, finished P6. So a very good start for him. Jorge Cajallo in the Citroën C3 was incredibly fast all weekend. Always impressive to watch, always dramatic. And take a look at this, very quick right-hander falling away from you, has a big moment with understeer there, holds the slide beautifully, corrects it beautifully. There's a slow-mo look at it again. And we watched from 5 different locations, all of them very, very quick, except for one. We were in the town for one of them as well. And here's Timo Süninen on the way to 4th place in his Skoda Fabia, doing a classic Rally 2, indeed Rally 1 as well, cut. Giandomenico Basso, P3, very good in the tight sections, doing the donuts and so forth. But for me, he got the prize for the best looking car as well. I love that light blue Skoda Fabia Rally 2 car. Just outstanding. It looked gorgeous in the Spanish mountains, the light. And how about this? This is Ivan Ares, another Spanish driver in his GR Yaris. Watch what unbelievable control. Let's look at it now in slow motion there's a sheer drop on the outside of that, by the way. And he gets the back end goes out, down, stays on the power. Get a look at the power he's got on. Wheel spin at the back there just to get it back on the road. 4-wheel drive, of course. Very impressive. This guy, super, super quick. Very, very brave, as you can see. And always spectacular as well throughout the rally. But all the glory and spotlight went in front of the Spanish crowd. totally justifiably to Jose Antonio Cohete Soares. Cohete is his nickname. It means rocket in Spanish, and very appropriate. Fast, slow, technical corners. Cohete was right there all the time. What a pro. And never won an ERC event, won a multitude of Spanish championships, obviously knows these roads pretty well, but knowing them well and executing it well, two different things, of course. And he was just perfect. Every time we saw him, he was absolutely on the limit. This guy is a class act from beginning to end. And here you see in the final results, I think it's really cool in Rally 2 as well, how they have three different tyre manufacturers, obviously Michelin and Pirelli, MRF not featuring in the results, but they were quick. And they actually have a separate championship for the tyre companies in Rally 2. How cool is that? Very impressive to see that. Really miss having a tyre war in Formula One. Yeah, big thanks to ERC for that footage. Amazing that it is available out there, and just shows what a good job the promoter is doing as well, the FIA too. And Cohete, what a star that guy is. I say some of the clamoring noise make the drivers uh, give them hero status. Well, you only have to go and watch them to see their heroes. The skill level of Suarez is right there with the best in the world, and he's a great guy because he did rally 2 for a while on the world stage, rally European stage, and it was difficult getting a drive, getting the money, all the rest of it. And so I just thought, right, stuff it. I'm just going to set up my own operation here in Spain. We've got great roads, got a great championship, and I'm just going to love driving in Spain and Spanish rallies. And good luck to him. Unbelievably quick still. He's not old at all, but very, very good guy. Really, real hero for me anyway. So yeah, thanks for watching that. Let's have a look and see where else we are. Yeah, so kind of on this subject, Savage Juggle, I think we're all forgetting that the FIA also governs WEC and other series, not just Formula One. So if the FIA wanted to go full hybrid, they would in other series as well, but it's mainly Formula One. Yeah, but I think you're forgetting there that it's not just the FIA. In Formula One, it is the teams, well, it's primarily Liberty, as we now know, and then it's the teams, and the FIA kind of then put all that together and administer it all and get paid a fee, a large fee to do that. So, yeah, the jury is out, obviously, still on the whole hybrid thing. And we've seen already the FIA introducing some hydrogen-based championships, I think, in the off-road thing. So, yeah, it's all confusing. And as I can say, let's hear it for truck racing, which is just the teams in the FIA with no third-party medalers at all. Thomas at Clara. Hi, Goatiest. Yeah. More of a goat, I think, goat in the real sense of the word. Saw a few of those in the rally Sierra Morena as well. I want to thank you for giving depth to my Formula One understanding. Love from Portugal. Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind. And as I say, I would like to. It hurts me a little bit, not hurts, but troubles me a little bit that people think that I'm negative. I'm not. I love my sport, but I'm going to defend the things that I believe are good about my sport if they start to get changed. That's the point, isn't it? Daniel Brodsky. Hi, Peter. Do you think that a car with worn out shock absorbers is even better to practice touch, feel and suppleness because it rolls more and you can feel more of all this stuff? I don't know about worn out shockers, but certainly there's nothing wrong with roll and softness if you want to iron out some gremlins in your driving, because indeed it will magnify your faults. A soft car, you'll lose, especially if it's underpowered, you'll lose a lot more speed if you make a small mistake in a soft car with not much power than a high-speed car that's very stiff. There'll always be weight transfer, so all you're doing is just magnifying the visibility of the weight transfer, and makes it easier to understand weight transfer if you're in a softer car with more roll. But it doesn't, if you go to a stiff car, it doesn't mean there's no weight transfer. As a Formula One engineer who shall remain nameless once said, oh, well, a Formula One car doesn't have any weight transfer because it's so stiff. Anyway, that was back in the late 90s. I always remember Rob having a laugh at telling us about that over his greasy spoon breakfasts. So, yeah, I wouldn't go. I mean, dampers are always a complicated thing to play around with. I mean, if they're worn out and the car's rolling a bit more, I wouldn't touch it. Just yeah, you will feel more definitely. Be more kind of more difficult probably to do what you want with the car if the dampers aren't working. If you are trying to create shorter corners, extend the straights, for example, and do a bit more turning in against lateral load. The dampers, if you've got worn out dampers, it isn't going to help. But roll is not a bad thing at a learning process. And I think that's one of the reasons, I've got a video out with Jock Clear, which is an excerpt from the chat we had on this live stream. And that was, why there are not more Formula One drivers properly using driver coaches of the Rob Wilson ilk and enhancing little points of their driving skill, their skill set. And he said, well, it's because they don't really want to be seen to be needing to improve. And part of that, which we didn't go into, is they don't really want to be sitting in a boring front wheel drive or rear wheel drive manual transmission road car with a lot of roll going around a cone circuit. It's below them to do that. And so that's another thing. And yet that is the best way you can improve your driving. It's absolutely proven now with Rob that you can, everything you need to do to say to a Charles Leclerc or a Max Verstappen or a Lewis Hamilton or anybody, you can say from the evidence that will come through driving a basic, boring, normal road car, providing it's manual transmission. And that's it. It's as simple as that, which makes it even more extraordinary to me that there aren't, more people out there doing it. Absolutely extraordinary. So anyway, let's have a look again at the, sorry, I just moved my chat box here, get back again. Right, next question. BKNDZ. Peter, what's the best way for Carlos to save his career? Back to Audi, Alpine, Red Bull? What do you think is the best move he can make now? Is there any future with Williams? Well, obviously there's some future with Williams. When it was clear that he was, he hadn't got a drive, he was being sacked by Ferrari. Big mistake for Ferrari to do that, in my opinion. But it was clear that he'd lost his drive, and he had a whole year ready to plan what he was going to say, 7 months to plan where he was going to go next. There was at least a 5-month window when he could have done a deal with Audi and joined Audi alongside Nico Hülkenberg and would be part of Audi's future, would be the brand ambassador for Audi with Nico, just do a brilliant job, as we know Carlos would. But he didn't. He went, because I guess at the time, like all these Formula One people, he's just thinking incredibly short term. Williams have got more points. Williams are faster than Sauber at the moment, so I've got to go with Williams. They've got the Mercedes engine. And so that's why he did it. Massive mistake, because he wasn't taking a medium or long-term view at all of his future. It was just an immediate fix. And yeah, he's had a couple of good races with Williams, but does he have a future at Williams? Not in the way that he would have had a future had he gone to Audi. That's the point. Of course, he's got a future at Williams. He can stay there for the next 5 years, I would guess. They will continue to run him. But will he go to Audi now? Well, there may be a slot if and when Nico Hülkenberg stops racing. But even then, Nico's kind of, I would have thought, in the brand ambassador role now that Carlos could have had, and that ship's probably sailed. I don't believe they would in any way change Bortoleto. He's a talent of the future. So I can't see that combination changing. It's pretty good, isn't it? That's a driver lineup. Alpine, maybe, yeah, from Williams to Alpine, both Mercedes power. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I know Alpine are doing a better job now, but Williams, in theory, aren't going to stay down forever, are they? Red Bull, well, he had a chance at Red Bull, I think, at that point when he left Ferrari, and I don't think it happened because I think he and Max kind of fell out when they were at Toro Rosso, and I think the problem was Max on this occasion. I don't think he really wanted. I don't think he pushed hard. I don't think he accepted Carlos, to be honest. I think he said, no, let's get a young guy. And so that's where they went that route. So I think that's the problem. And if that's the case, I don't think he'll ever go to Red Bull again. He could go back to Ferrari, I suppose. Ferrari, if Lewis or Charles leave, he's a guy that Ferrari, I'm sure now, with hindsight, realised they've made a big mistake getting rid of and would have him back. That's about his best option at the moment, other than staying where he is and hoping that Williams will come right. But he, you know, I'm not the only person who was pushing him like crazy to go to Audi, and he didn't listen to any of it, which is extraordinary, really, for me. But anyway, Andres Bastanchuri. Hi there. Should Formula One abandon manufacturers and just use, say, for example, the 3.9 litre V12 from Cosworth from the Gordon Murray to T50S? Well, you know, there are a few rumblings that whenever the new regs are going to be rewritten, whenever that's going to be, 3 or 4 years from now, probably, they are thinking, yeah, it's all too complicated. You know, Formula One is about a show, as we know, and let's not touch the show. That's the first thing. If we can enhance the show, that's great. And maybe we should listen to Peter Windsor's advice, which is not to play around with the cars, but just make it a much better TV show than we have already. Start going live into the debrief, start getting the drivers briefing live. Let's get GoPros in the road cars going to and from the circuit, from the hotels every day. Let's really take this to the next level of reality TV. That's a great idea. They may do that. They probably won't, of course. And so they'll still tinker around with something. Yeah, for me, it doesn't really matter what engine it is, so long as it's a proper engine, proper racing engine. Sounds like a great racing engine. And I mean, just going back to the rally, and you sit around quite a lot waiting for the stage to start. And at one point, we were in a town, a small town, the sort of head on as they're coming through an S bend in the middle of the town square, and we were with the marshals. And we were there for about half an hour, 45 minutes waiting for the first car to arrive. And there were, you know, klaxons going off and people rushing off to get drinks and beer and eating and whatever, you know, lots of great buzzing going on. But it was the noise of the car. And everybody, as soon as you can hear the engine note, everybody goes quiet. They listen to the engine note. They all start cheering and clapping as it comes through this amazing engine note. And, you know, four-wheel drive, the whole thing. And it's that, you know, that's what we don't have in Formula One right now, I think. So I would go for an engine that is, whether it's a V8, V10, whatever, you know, Gordon Murray thing, something like that. Yeah, definitely. And I don't think we need the manufacturers. I really don't. You know, I think, is McLaren a manufacturer? Not in the Audi sense of the word, obviously not. And we've got Ferrari, they're manufacturers. We've got McLaren, and race teams are race teams. That's what we want to see, racing cars and race teams, in my opinion. And the minute you do start having big manufacturers in there, because it's going to make the two guys sitting in the coffee shop in Madison Avenue or Wall Street or wherever it is, eating their cream cheese bagel, because they're going to say, oh, Audi are in Formula One, let's put the stock price up another 40%. You know, they will also be influenced by the global TV audience if it's an unbelievable show that Formula One is putting out, and there are 5 drivers tied within a point going into the last round. So that's, you know, that's to me is always the way to go. Look after the show, make the racing great, make the corners great, make the drivers great, and then, you know, put all that on the world stage in a way that's never been done before. That's what I would do. Right. Zavage says, question only remained, there are only 12 hours before the live. Any questions before that get deleted? Okay. So what kind of, we're talking about some people whose questions are getting deleted, and how my inability, my incompetence in getting through all the questions anyway within the 2.5 hours or 2 hours that we do these live streams. So thanks. Yeah, I'll do my best. Ruler of Apex, greetings from Spain. Nice title there, thank you very much. Kid Dynamite 3. Hi Peter, hope all's well. Do you think Max is complaining too much about the new regs? If Red Bull or Aston Martin were 2 seconds ahead of everybody, I certainly don't think they would complain. Let me think about that. I think Max is, I don't think he's complaining too much. I think he's just describing what is the situation. And so, you know, you could argue that it's because the Red Bull is not very good at the moment that Max's voice is being heard louder than anybody else's, because for the first time in his career, he's not able to do much about it. We've had plenty of opportunities and times in the past when the Red Bull hasn't been that good in terms of balance or grip, front end, shift, up shift, down shift, all the stuff that he's always moaning about. But he usually with the team, but he usually is able to get around it and find some way of being able to do the lap. But for the first time in a bad car, he's unable to do that. So that is the reason that people should be listening to him, in my opinion. You know, when a car's good and a team's winning, fine. And of course, everybody likes to win races, whether you're Max Verstappen or Kimi Antonelli. But it's interesting that for the first time in Formula One since in the Max era, we're seeing him in a bad car that he's unable to do anything about. That's the real point. And I think he is quite correct then in pointing that out. And why people would think a 4 times world champion who is pointing that out in a very rational way is moaning too much. They're obviously not listening to what he's saying or thinking about the sport enough. Norbert Overbeek, should more drivers take races in GT2, GT3 cars, and who? Well, there's an interesting segue point because we've got another video coming up exactly about this. It's about a young driver who's having his first season in GT3. And I hope you'll enjoy this video too. But in answer to your question, I think they should. But the driver in question, I'll leave it, to introduce it in the video, points out that the last Formula One driver of any talent or success who started in Formula Ford 1600 with no wings and no slicks was Jenson Button. And look at the finesse that Jenson has on the back end of the car. Now you could say, well, that's not how you drive a Formula Ford 1600 because that's all over the place. That's sliding a lot. Yeah, but because it's all over the place and sliding a lot, that's where Jenson learnt how to be so good with his throttle control coming out of corners, just to make sure he was getting a perfect exit within the parameters of a car that slides. And it's a very good point. And I think Ford 1600, I know these days it's obviously not a new thing in terms of the chassis, but it's still great racing. That is a very good way to start. And then GT3, as you'll see in this video, is quite a raw car, a GT3 car. There's quite a lot going on there for the driver to play around with. It's not that electronic, in other words. Anyway, with no further ado, let's have a look at this interview I did with a driver, I think, whose name you'll be familiar with because I've run a couple of his GoPros already. And but it's the first time we've chatted actually online. The first time we've chatted for a long time, actually, face to face. Horatio, great to see you. I met you very briefly when Howden introduced us years ago, but great to see you again. And first of all, thanks for all those great onboards you've sent our way, and how much I've enjoyed watching them, and I think a lot of the viewers have as well. I mean, your car control, obviously showpieced in cars with no wings and narrow tires, which is always a nice thing, but just fabulous to watch and really, really good. But even more significantly, I think from your point of view, probably being a racing driver with ambition, is that you now have a relatively solid, interesting sort of contemporary race drive now for this year and going forward. So tell us all about that, the car, the team, how it all came about, and what's going to happen next.
Well, thank you firstly, Peter, for having me on here. I really appreciate your all the features you've given me. So we first met at the British Grand Prix in 2019 when I grew up in America, raced go-karts there, and then moved to the UK to pursue racing because this really is the epicenter of motorsport if you want to make a career. And I was started in the BRDC serving cups of tea, and then I managed to talk my way into a test with Richard Dutton. Fortec was very gracious with me and had a lot of time. And then before COVID, my ambition was definitely in single seaters. And then after COVID happened, I lost my big backer. And I don't really know how it started. It was just a one time I sat in a historic racing car and it led to opportunities. So I started in Formula Fords, racing in the UK, which was really a fantastic training ground for any driver that wants to learn how to test themselves with not just the best drivers in the UK, but in raw machinery and with learning how to truly master mechanical grip and momentum cars. And I think really cutting my teeth there made it the transition into historic racing cars a lot easier and a lot smoother. So I got into Formula 3. Historic was my first drive. And then it snowballed really into driving a lot of cars for this car club, the Art Car Club, based in Florida. and now the Apex Club, who've been a big supporter of mine over many, many years. So I've raced everything from sports cars, single seaters, to a lot of prototypes. But really, my first experience of slicks and wings has come quite recently. So after last year, I had a fantastic season again in historics. And after winning at the Silverstone Festival, it led to an opportunity to test a McLaren GT3, which really GTs over the years, I've been more attached to Formula One and watching that. But in the last couple of years, especially GT3 racing, I've taken more of an interest in. And I find the racing in GT3s is just brilliant. And it seems like it's absolutely down to not just the car, there's very much involvement in the driver and the team engineering it. And essentially, every weekend when you watch it, you don't know who's going to win. And in the endurance racing as well, it's just makes fantastic viewing. So I got this test in the McLaren GT3 car at a very wet Silverstone in November, as I'm sure you can imagine what the weather was like there. And thankfully for me, it suited my driving background quite well with the historic racing, and I went extremely well within a lap of driving the car. And then it led to this opportunity to race in GT World Challenge Europe this season in a McLaren 720S GT3 with Team RJN, who have been a wonderful group to work with. They're a British team, and we're all very like-minded guys. Many Oxford-based people, so it's almost felt very easy to ingratiate myself within the team. And yeah, Paul Ricard, we've just come back from the first weekend, and it's a whole new concept, slicks and wings, and using aero through corners. Defeating my mind, and when I find the car starts to go, realizing if I just carry a bit more speed and just leave my hands stationary, the car will actually stick to the road. So yeah, it's been a really unbelievable last 12 months, in fact, last 6 months, really, because it was essentially through the historic racing, I managed to go from one car to another and keep climbing. And I found myself, I spent a lot of time racing in Formula Juniors, which is a lot of what you've featured, my Brabham video at Ricard last year. That was my first time at Paul Ricard, and in fact, one of the first times I'd raced the Brabham, and that's such a different art. But I really think if you can cut your teeth in those cars, learn the way the car moves, find the limits of mechanical grip, you learn the basics, and then when you transition up to aero, on the days when it may be wet, or in the days when you may be struggling with a bit of the tire, it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. Besides the fact it's thoroughly enjoyable having a 5-speed gearbox and a car that's sliding all over the place. It's very satisfying to be able to master one of those cars.
But I think you're finding the GT3 car, in one of the messages you sent me, quite raw, relatively raw anyway, given it being a 26 car. There are things there you can touch and feel in terms of a real race car, correct?
Absolutely. I was always quite open to the fact I always wanted to race modern machinery. It was just the opportunity didn't present itself yet. I've always told people when I race the historic cars, I actually have a smile on my face and I'm enjoying every millisecond of being behind the wheel. In the GT3 car, it's very much the same thing. I mean, it's incredibly fast. Going into scene during the race, I think we touched 180 miles an hour more than once. So the car is extremely fast.
I've got to stop you there, Horatio. And then what happened? Is it a lift or is it a brake? What is it?
At that point of the race, it was a brake, but leading up to it, there were moments where it was just, I think it's more of a confidence brake. But the issue with scene curves specifically, if you just go slightly wide, there was quite a lot of marbles on the outside. And once you pick those up on the tyre, it can really destroy the set of Pirellis. So no, it's still for me learning to manage myself, and you have to find that limit, which I already have in the historics, where you find that limit and you just push it a little bit further, and every time you then drive the car you can find it, and just don't overstep that mark. With the GT3, for me at the moment, it's finding that mark. If you just overstep it slightly, it can just go out of the window. So right now I'm still trying to refine my driving to suit the GT3 a lot better, but I was quite surprised with how fantastic the car was straight away, and the way my driving technique suited the GT3. The car is much more powerful, and we do have a lot more tire on the road. That is the big thing. I think the Formula Junior, people don't appreciate. It's only 130 horsepower, but it weighs nothing. And I still think the Formula Junior in the rain is one of the most difficult cars. If you can drive that in the rain with a very small power band that it's got through a 5-speed gearbox, if you can drive that in the rain, you can master anything. So I think learning the mechanical grip, and that's something we don't really see these days. A lot of kids, they bypass Formula Fords and they go straight into something like F4 or F3, which is super. The competition's huge in that. But I really think there is a benefit nowadays in starting in a Formula Ford and learning how the tires work.
Yeah,
You look back on until a certain year, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jenson Button was the last Formula One driver that started in a Formula Ford. And I really think you go all the way back, all the Formula One drivers learn their craft with
yeah,
mechanical
it's
grip
a good point.
and mastering that. People don't appreciate so much these days, and that's why you have drivers like Max, who is, other than the fact he's been terrific in Formula One, he, when I was watching him when I was a kid, he was an idol of mine in go-karts, and he was terrific in everything he ever raced. In the gearbox karts, he and Charles Leclerc were fantastic. A lot of the guys that are terrific in every category they're in, it's not just Formula One. They master everything
Yeah,
they've driven,
yeah, yeah.
and that's down to just being an all-round racing driver.
Speaking of Max, though, I think you bumped into him at Ricard, correct? He wasn't driving. What was he doing there, and how did you manage to bump into him anyway?
Yeah, that's right. So he was next door. We were pitted next door to his team, Verstappen.com Racing, and he was there just supporting his drivers, Chris Lullum, Jules Gounon, and Danny Juncadella. They're there with the Mercedes GT3, and they did a terrific job. I think they got quite unlucky in the race, but yeah, Jules was fighting food poisoning, I was reading after the weekend.
Mm.
But Max came along. He was there in the test day leading up to the event when it was very quiet. And he was just next door, just dressed quite casually, and just standing in the pits. And saw him. I thought, hang on, I recognise that chap. And so we went up to him, and I raced go karts for PSL karting. And when I was very young, when I was 12, I was one of the young ones on the team, and Max was at the absolute top already, winning international races. So he was very much my idol and someone I looked up to. And I can even remember my first ever go kart race. I had watched this terrific video of him going from last to first in a Rotax Minimax. I can't remember if it was at Genk or somewhere like that. But in the video, every lap, he would tuck his head against the steering wheel like this. And my first race, my father, I remember telling me, don't do that. It's dangerous. Just don't do that. So the first race, I needed a little more performance. And I started doing all that straight away. And it's something that stuck with me forever. And it was like one of my favorite tools in go karts. And in fact, even going into later formula cars, when you're slightly taller driver and you feel a lot of turbulence in your head and you just slightly get a bit further down, probably the difference is minimal, but it's mostly a mental thing. But so Max was very much an idol for me growing up, and to see him not just get the opportunity to race in Formula One, but I think to see him, he jumped straight into Formula Three and at the deep end. And I can remember when he signed with Toro Rosso, even way back when, and everyone was saying, "Oh, he's too young. He's this. He's that." I don't believe in that. I think if you can put yourself in the absolute deep end and you can swim, then you'll get a big head start on everyone. Antonelli's doing the same thing. I think if you can really prove yourself against the top guys, people have a bit more patience with you. And if you can develop quickly and, you're going to make mistakes at the very top. But if you have the confidence to go and compete against the best guys in the world, then I think that's only ever going to benefit you, and
Yeah.
it'll fast track all your learning. I've wanted to meet him for many, many years. So when I did see him, it was very easy to talk to him because there are so many things I wanted to talk to him about. He was one of the easiest human beings I've ever spoken to, let alone racing drivers. There's no ego there at all, but he really is a master of his craft. But for him to come along to Ricard and watch the GT3 racing, and for him to take such an interest in GT racing himself and test himself, I really think he's a man from an older generation. He is truly passionate about motorsport and wants to get in any car he can. And that's something I have a great deal of respect. And he's not afraid of putting himself in positions where people can, criticize him. And, I can't imagine any other. I'd love to see another Formula One driver like Sir Lewis Hamilton, for example. I'd love to see him jump in a GT car, who I have no doubt he'd be brilliant. But to have the confidence to just go and jump into any car and test yourself against something like the Nordschleife, go and race around there. I think I read this morning Piastri and Lando Norris were both driving around there, which is, I love to see this racing drivers taking more of an interest in
Mm,
contemporary motor racing
mm,
and putting themselves in other cars, because my heroes are of a generation: Dan Gurney, Jim Clark, Sir Jackie Stewart, when they would get in other cars other than Formula One cars and truly test themselves. And I think to be a complete racing driver, you should be able to jump into something else and master your craft. But no, Max was, all in all, just a fantastic guy to speak to. We spoke about motorsport. I think you and I touched on the past, the fact he might enjoy seeing some of the historic racing. He's a guy that I could very much see jump in a 60s Formula One car and master it and probably thoroughly enjoy driving something like that. So no, he was a terrific guy. I'm so happy the opportunity to chat to him, but also to walk away realizing he is every bit as good as I had hoped.
yeah, and it's fascinating that he's honed in on GT3 and the way you talk about it as well. So we need to keep following what you're doing this year. It's a great story, I think, to see where you've come from and how hard you've worked to get to this point, and then how it's going to go. What's the next race for you? What's the calendar look like?
So next on the calendar is Monza for the 3 hours. The
Nice.
big one after that is the Spa 24 hours, which is going to be it's a bucket list event for me, but it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to experience a 24-hour race. These two races beforehand, Ricard was a 6 hour, so it was quite good for longer driving stints and driving at night. Monza's all in the day, and it's more of a sprint. But GT racing is, even the endurance racing now, is very much a sprint to the end. The cars are so robust, the racing is great, but it is all the way through a sprint race. Everything,
Mm.
the dynamic of racing, you have to be consistent and can't make mistakes. Even a 30-second time penalty in a 6 hour race, it can destroy the race result in the end. So yeah, we've got Spa 24 hours. That's the big one. And then we've got Nürburgring after that on the Grand Prix circuit. Portimao, another terrific event. So they're all brilliant circuits, all Grand Prix circuits. So Monza's one I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, I
So
can
it's
imagine.
going to be another challenge in of itself, but that's going to be, it's very car dependent there. I think the McLaren will be brilliant.
And finally, Horatio, I think you've got a bit of a personal link in terms of going back to the Ardennes Forest to Spa.
Yeah, yeah, to say the least. My grandfather was captured there in 1944, and we were chatting about the fact he was liberated by 101st Airborne by the Americans. There's quite a funny Anglo-American as my background as well. I was born in Toaster but moved to America when I was very young, so I've always kind of identified as very much both, and especially American, having grown up there. So to go back to Spa and to be racing there, it's just over 80 years after my grandfather was at the Battle of Bulge. It's going to be quite a special full circle thing, and unfortunately I didn't meet him, but I'm sure he'd be watching and be very happy to see me back there.
Horatio Fitzsimon, what a guy! And I love his enthusiasm. I love his zest for life, the racing driver's life. Right now, he's just messaged me saying he's listening to the show, driving to Heathrow to go to Monaco Classic, which is on this weekend. And I said, "Are you racing?" in my reply. And he said, "No, no, but I got my racing kit with me just in case." And that's the way it should be, of course. A real racer, and lovely to hear him chat about Max, I think, and the time he spent with Max. I mean, it says quite a lot, doesn't it? And also his thoughts on racing drivers in general. Just very refreshing, and I hope you enjoyed that. And certainly that's going to be my contact with the world of GT3, this world that Max has got his feet into now, and I kind of get it now. I really do. And good luck to them. Good luck to all of them. And let's hope it all works out as well as it should for Horatio, who deserves whatever success he can have as a race driver. I think very talented guy, but a lovely guy as well. Very very privileged to be able to spend time with him like that. So moving on, Danny Jones makes a very good point. Peter talks with his hands. Not sure if that's a compliment or not. Don't know. Maybe I was going to say my Italian blood. I wish I had some, but I don't. My mum was half Burmese, So I suppose it's that. It can't be anything else. Certainly not English, is it? Biochem Girl 123 says, unfortunately, there are fundamental issues with these regulations that can't be fixed by adjusting parameters. It'll be 4 to 5 years before these can be fixed. And you're right there. You know, we talked about that at the end of the second video with with Mark about where we were going, what potentially could be done, and he agreed with you, Biochem Girl 123, that not much can be done. You know, MGUH is a massive transplant, ain't going to happen, and they probably won't go to front axle generation either. So it is what it is, and I'm sorry for those that think I'm negative, but I think it could be a lot better than it is, sadly, and that's the problem, isn't it? And I think Will's Wanderings kind of underlines that point. He says Max is still racing while Formula One dribbles. Good one. The Patsev, 100% agree with Peter. Formula One is already a wrong state with those rules. I don't even watch the races after Melbourne, but I watch Peter's videos. Well, thank you very much, the Patsev. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and it's a very fine line, isn't it, between opinion and being biased and understanding the truth in a normal, rational way, and not in a polarized way, if you see what I mean. And the world in which we live at the moment is incredibly polarized, isn't it? It's, you know, one thing or the other. You've got to be positive about Formula One, and if not, you're negative about Formula One. You can't love Formula One and suggest some changes that should be made or point out mistakes that have been made. But I'm going to try and do that. Drew says more money is positive, nothing more positive than more money. Well, I think that's right. Money never really solved anything. And just to go back to rallying, there's a lot of talk, as I say, about potentially a new promoter coming in for World Rally and what should be done, how rallying can be improved. But I hope you think what I think, which is that having got a taste of what we saw in the Sierra Morena rally this weekend, that it doesn't need much change. Just leave it as it is. These guys are unbelievably quick. If you want to see the hero element of them, go and watch them on a stage and do what, look at that. Look at Ivan Ares. That I've replayed it 3 times in slow-mo. That moment he had, he nearly went off the edge there in a Yaris, which is a quick car. For those surroundings, it is a quick car, believe me. And he's got the power on and the smoke pouring off the rear axle, and he's got half the car off the bank, just brilliant. And that's all the hero these drivers need to be. Don't play around with it too much. Yeah, of course, give it a bigger footprint TV-wise. I think rallying do a very good job, actually, with the drones and the helicopters, and it's an incredibly photogenic sport. And perhaps one thing they could do is have lots and lots of huge, big screens everywhere in the areas where there are going to be fans for the special stages, and in the towns when they're going there. Spend a lot of money, spend as much money as you can on huge screens, because what the pictures we're getting are just incredible. Absolutely unmatchable, I think, what you're seeing in rallying at the moment. Brian McClendon, what's the best historic race in the USA? I think quite a lot. I mean, obviously, I'll send Horatio that question. He'd know a lot more than I. Hey, where are we? Hey, Horatio, I just had a question in about what is the best historic race in the USA? Race singular, would you say? So we'll see what he says. I mean, he raced all his career so far basically in America, and he races historics as well as he races anything else, so he would know. 85 Portuguese Grand Prix, Senna's first win, says Adi Mateo. What do you recall from that win and day? Regards from Romania. I actually saw his green sheet, the Steve Hallam green sheet of Ayrton in the build up to that race and during the race. And he, like all things, he didn't have a perfect car, a bit of understeer from my memory, and he got the lap in just that he wanted in qualifying, but it was touch and go. And yeah, I don't think there's much to talk about in the race. I mean, it was impressive to see the blobs of rain and the smudging on the green sheet, but yeah, he because he was in front, obviously he made it much easier for himself and didn't have to worry about blinding spray or anything, and just pull out a nice lead and control the lead, control the pace. And it was very, very wet. I do recall that from start to finish. I was there. And actually, before that race on the Saturday night, I'd actually had dinner with Ayrton in a restaurant near his villa. I went to his villa and we had a drink. You know, I was with some mates and we had um, well, a drink. I can't remember what mineral waters I think out the back, and then we all followed one another and went to a restaurant. And it was quite a long table, very long table. I think I sat next to Maurizio Gugelman from memory, and I think Ayrton was at the head of it. And maybe not Maurizio. No, maybe I'm. Anyway, it was, and then he went out and won the Grand Prix. So very good. His yeah, his first win. So, but I was working for Williams at the time, and it was I was the sponsorship manager, but it was Nigel's first full season with Williams, and he hadn't. The car was not good at all. The Williams Honda FW10, and the terrible throttle lag, and so when the power came in, it was literally an on-off switch, as Keke Rosberg described it with his right foot. There'd be nothing happening, and suddenly, bang, the power would be there, and it was a lot of power, probably 700, I would think. And in the wet, the car was undrivable. But Nigel did go off on the outlap from the pits, damaged the car a bit, had to put a new nose on the car from memory, and he started from the pit lane and finished fifth, driving through nothing but blinding rain throughout the race. So to me, that was as good a drive as Ayrton's, to be honest. Call me biased, but it was, it was one of the, I think it was Nigel's best wet weather to win for sure. And certainly one of the best wet drives I've ever seen. Absolutely superb. Incongruent. Well, a bit of a rude name there. Tart you are. Anyway, hydrogen. They're saying with what's that? No, teeth. So they don't like the hydrogen. Simon Wing, you're the best, Pete. Love all your content. I learn a lot. Thank you very much. Very kind. Zabid says, I wasn't saying you were negative, Peter. It was more sarcasm. Sorry for the comment. Okay, don't worry. If it was sarcasm, that's great. But it got me going into thinking about the balance between bias, opinion, and the truth. And these days, sometimes it's very difficult to uncover the truth. And sometimes it's difficult to live with the truth because the general consensus is focused in another direction altogether. And because of the way media works. But all you can do is do your own thing and think things through and try to see the light and the way forward, which is what we're trying to do. Incongruent. You are again. Winning in Formula One now equals achieving the lowest threshold of human and technical capability. Oof. Well, we shall pass on your sentiments to liberty in Formula One. Kyle Collages. Peter, do you think they're close on the regulations? I do. The racing has been better than the previous formula for me. Well, it depends what you mean by racing. As I've said before, it's one thing to do an after you Claude overtake into the chicane, as Max did on Pierre Gasly, and then for Pierre Gasly just to breeze past coming out of the chicane, which would never normally happen in normal racing cars. And it was like the engineers knew it was all going to happen. It was almost like they were controlling it all from the pit lane anyway. As I say, what is the point of paying Max billions, trillions, or whatever they pay him, when any driver could basically do what he did. Any good Grand Prix driver could do what he was doing there. It's okay, whatever you say, I'll press this button. Okay, oh wow, I've passed Pierre Gasly. Oh wow, he passed me. That's not Max Verstappen. That's just a normal driver. So for me, that's not racing, but it may come under the heading of, oh, there's an overtake. Oh, there's another overtake. There's 2 overtakes. Let's add that to the list. But they're not overtakes. They're just whatever they are, power surges or power desurges. Incongruent Tart says the sport is being bled very slowly in capital letters. Lots of incongruence here, so I think we'd better move on here. Move along, please. Move along down the other end of the bus. Yep. Right, Max Flashart. Hope you like the T-shirt, Max. I think this is all you're doing, isn't it? I'm going to get rid of the mic for 1 second so you can have a proper look at it. 1 second. There you go. I know what's going to happen. Excuse me. I know what's going to happen now. You're all going to say, I want one of those. And I'm going to have to go into the T-shirt business and make my fortune. Make quarters great again. Right. Max Flashart says Formula Ford is especially great in the wet. Well, it is. Absolutely. And that's exactly what what Horatio was saying. 24 hours of Spa is no joke. Agreed. Forgive me. Who is this fine fellow being interviewed? I'm glad you think he's a fine fellow. It's a pretty apt description, actually, isn't he? He's a fine fellow. He's Horatio, as in Horatio Lord Nelson, but the same name. Fitz Simon, Fitz hyphen capital Simon. He is a young racing driver who has wanted to be nothing more than a racing driver throughout his life. Started in karting, born in England, but raised in the United States. Still has a very pronounced English accent, as you can hear, because his family's English, I guess, and raced a lot of karts. And then because he didn't have the money, like a lot of these guys, just thought, right, by default, I'll do Formula Ford 1600, which I can afford, and then I'll race historic single seaters until somebody, and I'll push as hard as I can, and I'll get to know as many people as I can, and try to get a drive. And that's what he's doing, and he's got a drive. He's got a very good drive in a GT3 car and a McLaren, and doing well. So good luck to him. I met him at the BRDC lunch that he mentions in that interview. And because I know Howden Ganley very well, used to watch him race in Formula One, very aware that he was the first driver ever to break the 100-mile-an-hour barrier around the Brands Club circuit in a Formula 3 car. From memory, a Chevron in about 1970, 71. And as soon as I came over to England, he was one of the guys I got to know very well. He was racing for BRM at the time, Marlboro BRM, doing a good job, not slow, nearly won the Canadian Grand Prix, 73. And he then went off to form Tiger with Tim Schenken, very good car company. And that's indeed Kenny Hankamer was working there as well. Talk about all the good guys. And anyway, Howden I've known for years, lovely bloke, New Zealander, Kiwi, part of the instrumental lineup at McLaren when Bruce first started the team as well. Quick driver, classic New Zealander. Anyway, I'm not sure how they met, but certainly Horatio caught Howden's eye as a young talent. And I remember I was sitting at the table at the BRDC and Howden tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'd like you to meet this young guy. He's going to be very competitive. See if you can do anything to help him. And it was Horatio. So, and he was a young kid, as young as he was in that picture with Jenson Button. And it's that day probably he's wearing a Silverstone jacket, isn't he? And he's just been pushing and driving well and showing his skill ever since. And I was captivated by those onboards in the Brabham BT6 ex Paul Hawkins Ian Walker car. Put it on the YouTube channel, and as a result of that and the bit of furore that created online, apparently, the backers that he's had in classic single seaters have decided to take him a little bit further now into GT3. So good on him. Brilliant. I love to see things happen there. Max says, Peter, do you like spicy food? Can you handle the spice? To be honest with you, I don't. Although this may sound very odd, my dad worked for a company called Reckitt and Coleman in in England, but mainly in Australia when we went out there. And one of the key products of Reckitt and Coleman was, I don't know if it still is, but certainly was at the time, was Coleman's English mustard. And I grew up with English mustard with a lot of things, mainly obviously with beef and stuff. And so I love mustard, but I don't actually like spicy food. I'm not into chili. I'm not into anything really spicy. So I'm sad. I'm sorry about that, but I'm not. I've got a fairly, I don't know if it's because of the years and years and years of travel. I've got a fairly sensitive stomach and I know what I can take and what I can't take. And I'll never eat shellfish now, for example, after a couple of bad bouts of that. And sort of Jean-Pierre Jarier-esque. He says, remembering that occasion when Jean-Pierre ate some sort of shellfish before a race and was sick, still sick 2 weeks later. And I thought, right, on the road, no more shellfish, thanks. So I'm fairly boring with food, and a lot of it is, I love pasta, I love Italian food more than anything else. Right, where are we going? Majiro Stock says, I wasn't necessarily a Verstappen fan at first, but his driving ability and fighting spirit over the last few years have really won me over. If he were to switch to GT3, for example, I'd follow him. Well, there you go. And that kind of echoes what we've been doing there with Horatio, doesn't it? What he's saying about that and what he's saying about Max. So have a look at that. I'll put that video with Horatio out as a separate video as well. So you don't have to keep, it looks great. The t-shirt, that is amazing. So yeah, I got this done. I went online, just found a Spanish company that would do these logos, and the thing took like 3 days. Really nice quality T-shirt too, and I did a good job with the logo, I think. So, Savage Dougal says, Palmer says Lewis peaked in 2008. Don't know how he came to that conclusion. Uh, excuse me. Palmer. I presume we're talking about, what is it, 2014 F2 champion. Jolyon, are we talking Jonathan here? I don't know. But I mean, what an absurd thing to say. He must have he must have been quoted out of context. I can't believe anyone would say that. It must have been in terms of being a rookie in Formula One combined with his natural talent. When do you think Lewis was at his peak? And he probably thought, oh, well, 2008, after 08, he wasn't a rookie anymore, really. I know 07 was his first year, but 08 was his second rookie year. Maybe it was that, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Can't imagine it was anything else. Max Flash up. Persistence works in the real world if you're determined enough. Yeah, and I think Horatio is determined enough. And I'll never forget the last words Jim Clark said to me when I told him as a young kid that I wanted to be involved in motor racing and work hard and never wanted to. I don't know exactly what I wanted to be in motor racing: racing driver, mechanic, truck driver, I don't know, flag marshal, journalist. And Jimmy said, whatever you choose, don't give up. So long as you keep going, don't give up, keep the passion, you'll make it. And I've never forgotten that. Christian Samodi, Domenicali, Formula One is doing great, and that there are more people who love it than people who dislike it. This is somehow nulled by the fact that they had these important meetings to fix the current regs. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of time for Stefano Domenicali, and he's got a very, very difficult job. It's my mate Julian. Better decline that call, I think. He's got to please a lot of people. He's got to keep the balance between liberty and the teams, and he's been put in that invidious position where I've described. Let's keep the FIA out of it because they're basically administrators paid by Formula One to administer their sport. But if you take the balance between liberty and the amount of money they put into Formula One, let's not forget that, particularly during the COVID era when they underwrote all those races, and the teams and what they want great cars, they all want to win, they don't want to spend any more money than they have to, but they want to make a fortune. It's not an easy job, being in the middle of all that. And so I think Stefano is a great politician, does a great job in that sense. But that is, what does that say when there are more people who love Formula One than dislike it? That's not a greatly positive statement, is it? Because what we really want to say, there are now more people who love Formula One than any other sport in the world, or for any other annual world championship sport in the world. And I think that probably is the case. I'm surprised that that's not talked about more. If you think about sports that are held annually, world championships that begin at the beginning of the year, end at the end of the year. So we're not talking about the Olympics, talking about the World Cup, not talking about anything else. Then do more people watch Formula One than say the World Series in America or American football? Probably. Oh yeah, on a global basis for sure. So it is the world's biggest sport, and it's going through glitches now for the reasons we've been talking about a lot on this live stream, how those regulations were formed, the mistakes that were made. And I think what we saw as a tipping point of too much power has been given to the rights holder to define the technical regulations and the sporting regulations, therefore. And I think we'll come back from that tipping point going forward. I think that's what will happen. And I think Domenicali, knowing Stefano quite well, I think that's what he'll do. And he'll find that balance. But I think it's just gone a little bit too far in the way of the rights holder at the moment, and not in the way of what was logical for the teams. And I keep remembering that comment that Mark Slade made, which was that in the build-up to the final signing off of these regulations, a year or so before the sign-off, there were several team key people voicing the opinion that the new regs would ruin great corners, and would also be a drama in terms of getting the cars off the line and real motor racing. And they were shouted down, and that's wrong. They shouldn't have been. Quite clearly, they shouldn't have been. Are you Dutch, Peter? No, I have got lots of friends in Holland, but I'm not Dutch. And But what a lovely country, lovely people. A lot of time for Holland. Drew says, Peter, how strong is the rear wing on a Formula One car? Seen as they say it takes a lot of load. If you stand on it, will it crack? I don't think it will. No, I think the same reason. No, I haven't seen anybody standing on a rear wing for a while. But no, wouldn't crack. No, you could do that. I'm not sure the teams would be too impressed if you jumped on a rear wing for the race, but front wing end plates are the things you have to worry about a little bit more. And there have been occasions when before the teams were really organised and had proper tensor barriers around the cars on the grid to keep the fans away, that the odd fan would knock a front wing end plate or something like that and actually damage it and bend it, which didn't go down too well. Zavage Douglas says, asked to pinpoint Hamilton's peak on the Formula One Nation podcast. Palmer went all the way back to his second season, and I'm talking about Jolyon Palmer. Oh, well, I think he's crazy to say that. I mean, 08, he drove beautifully, but what are we saying? He wasn't driving that well in 2021. He got better. He was a better qualifier the more he went on, particularly after 16. And he was at his peak for sure was 21. And then because 22, the car was a different sort of car, all the shock of Abu Dhabi all added up, and he went away a little bit from his style, went into a wider approach to corners, more braking in a straight line. From 22 onwards, he's coming back a little bit, but 21, he was unbelievably good. Max Flashart says, we need the Harlem Globetrotters of motorsport, a team from any discipline that travels to different series and competes against the professionals. Ex-Formula One, NASCAR, Rally, WEC, IndyCar. Yeah, that'd be quite fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. I mean, when I see these guys like Jose Antonio Cojete Suarez, you think that guy's got so much latent talent. It'd be wonderful to see him in, for example, in a GT3 car, how he would go. So, Windsor beating on technology again. Yeah, I know. It's, I think I have actually just recently replaced the cable for my main camera, and so I'm surprised that it's that sensitive. But there you go. What do we know about technology? Just want to move on now to Westerly Storm says, hi Peter, I was watching the British touring cars this past weekend, and unfortunately the dreaded electrification has arrived there too, with push to pass making a nonsense of the racing. I'm very pleased to hear that, because my mate Alan Gow promotes that series or runs it, and he's always very, very dogmatic about how brilliant it is, and they can do no wrong. So I'll pass that message on to him with great glee, get him to advise on that one. He'll say something like, well, it was the best racing we've had for 38 years. We had record crowd, more TV viewers than Formula One, or whatever he's going to say. He'll have a good answer to it. I know that. Max says he actually worked in aviation for 15 years. Wow, that's great. Good to know. Josh, geez, too many variables with different kinds of cars to say who's better in what year. That's about the A-team, the Globetrotters. Westerly Storm says, I have found old 1980s Rallycross with Murray Walker on YouTube. That's really good racing. Turbocharged 777. Hey, Peter, what do you think of Leonardo Fornaroli? How does he compare to the likes of Bortoleto and Hajar? I think he's really good. And I would say he's at least as good as those two. And I think potentially he's got even more opportunity. I just don't know how it's going to go with McLaren. I just don't know how much opportunity he's got there. I mean, it's certainly probably better than in all the other options out there, because I'm not sure he's flush with money as such. And it didn't hurt Oscar Piastri to take a year off. But having said that, he had a clear path into the race team or into a Formula One drive, didn't he? And I don't know. I think I'd just love to see Fornaroli racing this year, keeping his hand in. But I've got a lot of time for him, and he drove very well under pressure in Formula 2. Really good. Very underrated driver, I think. Royism says we should have Verstappen, Alonso and Hamilton racing Aussie supercars Bathurst. That would be awesome. Yeah, kind of echoing what Horatio was saying in his video. He'd love to see Sir Lewis Hamilton, as he called him, which was very nice to hear, in a GT3 car or something else. And his heroes are Dan Gurney and Jim Clark, because they used to do that sort of thing all the time. And Dan in the Cobra, thanks to the Henry Ford for that picture, by the way. And Jimmy in his Lotus 40 at Riverside 65, having just won the World Championship. He then puts his reputation on the line driving an incredibly difficult Lotus 40 around Riverside, knowing he's got no chance to win, but still giving it 100%. You know, that's racing, isn't it? That's what they're all about. And that's what they do well. And that's what Max is doing now. And it's an interesting point, I think. I was thinking the other day, you know, when Max goes to Miami, he's probably hasn't thought about Formula One for a month or something. And he's just done this race at the Nürburgring, admittedly tainted as it was by that sad news on Saturday. But nonetheless, he's raced the thing, and he's got out there, that GT3 Merc, and he's had some fun in it on a great circuit. And he'll probably get to Miami a bit more buoyant and energized than most of the other drivers as a result. You know, he's just being a racing driver, getting on with it in the way that Jim and Dan and many others used to. Good. Okay. Max says DTM and Super Formula keeps drivers sharp. Yep. We've got a Super Formula this weekend, second round, haven't we? So that'll be fun at Autopolis. So looking forward to that. Why do you think Fornaroli wasn't that impressive results-wise before coming to Formula 2? Because I don't think he had a full budget to do a great job with a great team. And it's not only the team you're with, but it's how much money you've got to do a lot of testing in another type of car during the year and to keep right on top of things. And if you don't actually have a full budget, it's very difficult. Formula 2 is slightly different for him because he was with Invicta, a very, very good team. And they would have made sure that he was on the pace in everything there. And that was why I think it happened. So there you go. Right. 12:40. We've just about shot our bolt, I think, on this one. And sorry about the camera drama. Try and sort that out with yet another cable. If that's a solution, I don't know. And we'll draw a line on this one. And I'll be doing the videos. Obviously, this weekend is our last free weekend. We've got a big golf tournament going on here this weekend, which will be the center of attention. But we'll be keeping in touch with what's going on elsewhere, obviously, particularly in Japan with Super Formula. And then I'll try and do another live stream early next week in the build-up to Miami, the much-awaited Miami Grand Prix with the new regulations. We'll see how all that goes. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making the show happen. You know, it's yes, we can have guests, and I get guests periodically, and we chat, and we have the regulars, Mark and Scarbs and so forth. Probably Jock as well, but ultimately the guests are you. You know, you come onto the show, and it's so great to be able to have you there. So thanks very much for that, and have a good weekend. Enjoy, and look for the videos, look for updates, which I do on our community page. I use that now effectively as my social media page that I would have used in the old days for Twitter, but I now use just communities and YouTube. So if you want to keep in touch with stuff, there you go. Anyway, in the meantime, take care.